Guys, another founder wisdom pod slash CEO wisdom pod. We have both today. Sarah Jensen. She is CEO and founder at Jensen and Co. Sarah, glad to have you on the pod. Can you briefly introduce yourself? Tell us what you're working on nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, thanks for having me on. So, Sarah Jansel, and what we do is we build, brand, and grow awesome websites, but we use two specific platforms. Primarily, we work in Shopify, so a lot of e-commerce based, as well as Kajabi. So, kind of on both the product and the service side of things, and I run my business on both as well. So, we're doing a lot of client work to get them ready for the holiday time.
You started that during COVID, if I am right.
I did. Yeah, that's right. Yep, in
So tell
2020.
tell us like the how and tell us about you on the battlefields trying to adapt to the tough situation that COVID was.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, in 2020, at the beginning of the year, I was a VP for a tech company. And, I was running my own fashion business in e-commerce, and that was really fun. And I was thinking about scaling the fashion business. So it wasn't like, the corporate job or my own business at that point. It was kind of both. And then the pandemic hit. And as we all know, the world kind of shifted. So what happened was I started getting a bunch of requests from people to help them get their businesses online because I had a very specific skill, and it wasn't something that I really sought out, to be honest. It was coming out of a need of people who were like, "Wait a minute, I have a business. I know you. I'm trying to figure out how to get this online." So I started to help a couple of people, and we'll put quotation marks around calling them clients at the time. And I suddenly realized, wait a minute, this is the perfect blend of all of the business things I was doing and the creative that I was looking for, which is why I started the fashion business. And I could marry them both up in a completely different way. And so I was totally sold on that, and obviously had some big decisions to make and quickly left my VP job in a couple of months. So that's kind of how that happened. And from a battlefield perspective, I would say I was there to help carry the battlers forward because it was a very opportune moment. I realized not only do I love helping clients to do that and helping them, guide them in the way that I have been doing in my corporate, just in a bit of a different way. But, in this case, they were needing some help and we weren't going to see that go away. So I felt like it was a really opportune time to get into it.
Love it. Websites are kind of hard to sell because they've been around for quite a while. There's a bunch of websites, creation agencies. I still see opportunities with that. For example, well, me first, I started out, I think my first business a decade ago was website building.
Mm.
That launched me, that propelled me in this world. So I'm grateful for that. Would sell each website for 5K a pop and up. Sage Solutions Web was that the name of that business, which is quite funny. Einstein logo and stuff. Uh, yeah, it's a basic. It's the presentation. And back in these days, you needed to have a website that was like 2012 or something like that. Um, Nowadays, yeah, people still need a nice and crisp looking website. It's nice presentation. Every time I have someone on this spot or for the pre-interview, I filter them by looking at their website and their LinkedIn. Is their website dating to in the 1980s? If so, I don't think they'll be like a good fit for my pod. They just don't care about presenting themselves right and well. In the age of Canva and in the age of WordPress
Hmm.
Divi, which I use, and I build a bunch of websites on a monthly basis because I have multiple companies, and there was like, why not sell or restart this website agency of mine? Me, I promote COOs and CEOs for each of my agencies, so one for the website, one for the SDR, and the model being that yeah, people still need crisp looking website, one pagers done somewhat quickly. I use WordPress Divi, and that's amazing. It's very cost efficient and so forth. So that would be my mental model to sell it, and I sell it that it's very cheap. It doesn't cost a lot and you will look good pretty quick in the span of like 3 days. Let's call it $1,000 per one pager. First, what do you think about that model? And second, how do you sell your own websites, your own product? How do you distinguish yourself in this saturated quote unquote market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a market for that because there are a lot of people who just need a page. and they just need something like from brand awareness. So I think if that's your market, then that probably makes sense, right? So not everybody needs a more comprehensive website like the clients that we work with, which is, people who are trying to sell multiple things online. So they're transacting, and there's typically not just the straightforward purchase. I come here, I want to purchase your product, and I leave. There is a lot more to that these days in the age of affiliate programs and, capturing people in funnels and like the million things that you're trying to do, and not just try to sell that product, with the end goal being that you do actually sell that product. So, I think that that's a lot of what we see. So, and then same on the service end, right? So courses, lead magnets, like there's all kinds of things our clients are trying to do. And we're just packaging that up as a website. My background is actually, I spent 20 years in business and human resources. And so I've got a strong background around, the leadership development and the education and the things that clients need to do. And I have the backing as someone who's actually run a store. So when I think about our process and how we help clients, I'm not just coming at it like we're just going to quickly get something up, because my market's a little bit different. For me, it's really understanding who the client is and all of the multitude of things that they're trying to do it. And we package it up nicely, to look like a website, but there are multiple things that are going on behind the scenes in those businesses that we're helping them adapt and build.
Love it. How much should I pay usually if you are building a Shopify for me? Is there like a monthly recurring component to it?
Not necessarily. So for us, I mean, you're probably looking at 4,000 and up. So that would be for a standard website. If you're looking to do anything custom or you want something more bespoke, you're going to pay at least double that, probably. If you want something completely designed to you, all of our clients are unique, but that's probably what you're looking at there. The monthly component is really, it depends on what you want and it depends on where you're at. We do have clients that we service monthly because we do website work, custom work, we're growing with them, they're adding things, email marketing, those types of things, but not every client needs that or wants it at this point.
So let's call it 20K per month, which is 240K a year, which competes with your ex VP salary or something around these lines.
Yep, something along those lines.
Plus the freedom, right? So it's quite amazing what you built for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it's allowing me, what I'm really trying to do now, in addition to what we're doing there, is get out and really educate people, because the number one thing I'm seeing in all of these entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who have all these goals and dreams of things that they want to do is, everyone kind of out there in the market talks about like self-confidence and like, you got to learn this skill, or, there's a coach or a mastermind for this thing. And I'm like, yeah, but if that person doesn't actually believe at the core that they can do it, the chances of them taking action to go out and learn all those things and work with those people are actually zero. And I can usually tell right away when I'm talking to somebody and they're telling me what they want to do, where they're at on that spectrum of belief. And so the other side of my business is now I'm getting out and being more active about talking about being a speaker. I've been speaking for forever. As a VP, everyone's like, hey, can you come talk to us about this? Right? Like, not a stranger to that. But really doing that with the keynote speech I'm delivering, the underpinning of that is about 4 beliefs that I personally have had in life and business, because I feel like everyone talks about all these other things, but they don't talk about all of the things that go on behind the scenes or within the person to allow yourself to grow into that, to leave that VP career or whatever it is for you. So hopefully that will help me connect with more people and inspire them to get out there and do it.
Love it. Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Love it. I think especially amongst ladies, they grew up to be this little princess, and always be pampered and so forth. They don't have the confidence, or should I call it the testosterone? Because yeah, it's always an equilibrium between both, to go and launch. They like this. Well, most ladies, I think they looking at my mom, my wife, and a bunch of female friends that I have. Most of the time, they lack this self-confidence. They're like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay in the back scene and be
Mhm.
quiet, be a nice little girl. How can we change that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see that change. Like a lot of things that we're seeing around social media and that people are trying to find a voice. But, I think that's a tough one because you're right. Like when I think about what I was growing up, it was like watch your manners, or it's rude or it's impolite to say this or do that. I just kind of grew against the other grain, right? Like I was a tomboy. I didn't care about that. I kind of said my opinion. And so I think sometimes it just takes one person to get out there and inspire people to do that. And so when I talk about that speech, I'm going to talk about some of the crap that I went through and how, there were a lot of people in my life, let's face it, right? The people we grew up with, you talked about your mom and your wife. It's like, their parents and the people they grew up with, like a lot of the people we know and love and trust from a young age form our belief systems. And so that tends to dictate, whether we know it or not from a young age, how we will perform and what we will turn into as we grow up. And so I think it's just recognizing that and sort of challenging the status quo in that. And my stories are ones of, adversity. And like they weren't a good time, you know what I mean? And I lived and it was okay. And, you might go out there and you might try something and it's going to feel super uncomfortable to do it or be the loud voice, but you'll probably learn something from that. You're not going to die, right? So, it's like just getting out there and trying to encourage people to have the strength to do it.
Yeah, most of the time in these events, it's mostly self-created adversity. It's mostly cortisol spikes that you create yourself, because in the end, it's not that hard, most of these events, or at least when you go through multiple of those, that's what you understand, this wisdom, this
Mm-hmm.
maturity, quote unquote. Um, with ladies, I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's about education, and it's nice nowadays to see, the gender conversations, although they can be quite confusing. Me, I talk in biochemical terms, so testosterone and
Mm-hmm.
estrogen, but for younger ladies to always think that they're fragile, is completely ridiculous. Like I'm raising puppies right now and they're not fragile, they're tough little things. If you're born on this earth, you're born with grit, with resilience, you're the top of the top. This little sperm, it has to fight to get to the egg, and you're really the top of the top when you come to this world, and you're adaptable, and you have that fight in you, whether you're men, women, or whatever you want to be. And I think, with that logic, a lot of parents, what they do, oh, my daughter's fragile, let's not have her do any sports, she'll get hurt, she'll have a broken arm. But no, sports is essential in this society, and competition is essential. It teaches you teamwork and to continue through the pain. And yeah, the Barbie kind of analogies, and be a nice little ladies with manners, that kind of need to stop, if that's still a thing, because I'm not that knowledgeable about the topics, but I still see it in society.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting that perspective. And I agree with a lot of things that you said, but I also see the other side of it, which is, when I think about my business, we service men, women, like, all kinds of clients that come to us with a variety of business genres. But I haven't been out there pumping the horn saying, we really want to help women entrepreneurs, yet 99.9% of my clients have been female. So, I mean, obviously, I'm attracting that, which is great, and it's wonderful. But we are starting to see, and I think especially through the pandemic, we were starting to see really interesting, innovative things that people were coming up with because they were stuck. And we had to be innovative and we had to think about how we could do or go on with life in a different way. And I think that's really inspired things. And I do think it's just being done maybe a little bit more quietly, like maybe it's just a little unseen, but it's happening.
Yeah, in your case, is that it's your brand, right? It's Sarah Jansel that's at the forefront.
Hmm.
Maybe if you build, like more of a company brand or something, maybe that it will be other types of entrepreneur. But I think that is an advantage. When I started my first company, I fully and just targeted realtors in Quebec, Canada. Nowadays, I have clients all over the world and so forth, but I was focused on that, and I quickly became top three, and that meant I had at some point 100 realtors that I was serving on a monthly basis, making 30K MRR back in my young days, which was quite wonderful, allowed me to travel the world and so forth. Um, in your case, it's perfect that you're just targeting women. It's an easier sell. I mean, it's not on purpose, but I think it's women are underserved, and I do think that there is a growth trend in terms of women starting businesses more and more. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely take advantage of that. I want to talk about the podcast that you have, because you've been at on both sides of the mic.
Yep.
You had a couple of interviews today. Why the pod? And then I'll get to some technical questions to learn from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, I never saw myself starting a podcast. So if you had asked me like 2 years ago, I would have been like, nah, that's not for me. Like that was never a part of the plan. And, I think what I realized getting into business and talking with a lot of people and working with clients is everybody, like, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get out there and have value, but I think a lot of the people who I'm going to work with are probably going to be on podcasts and they're all going to be in different places, right? So some people are going to want to have want a place to land, to hang out for a while, to kind of evaluate you, right? Like there's everybody has their own threshold for what their evaluation process is, or they're just going to consume your content because they like it, right? Like whatever the reason. And so, I've been on Instagram and I've been on Facebook and I'm like, great, now I'm going to get out and speak. But the podcast for me is kind of 50-50. And I don't know if you find this about your guests as well, because, but for me, I find it's like 50-50. I always get in with the intent that I'm going to serve my community. I'm going to have really interesting guests on, whether it's my topic or it's somebody else. It's going to be something that's relevant, that's going to help people that we need to be talking about. But at the same time, I'm typically learning something really interesting from that client. I'm going to get on that
All the
call and I'm
time.
going to be curious, right? So, I feel like it's kind of served me as much as I'm hoping it served my community. And, even now, I don't know what technical part you want to get into if it's from a sales perspective, but I would say I didn't go into it necessarily with that mindset, but now realize that people will find me on LinkedIn or they'll find me on Instagram or they'll hear about me in a Facebook group, wherever it is. And the next thing they'll say is, I found you here, but then I went to your podcast and I listened to a couple of episodes. This is the one I listened to and I knew you were my person. And I'm like, wow, that is something that I didn't expect getting into this. And I'm like, it's what's going to keep me going because I know that there's somebody out there who's listening that needs to hear this message. And I mean, it's win-win, right? So
I had Tracy Hazard on my pod yesterday, so she's on track to build certainly a $10 million podcast empire, and she's aiming for 100 million next year. And she said, yeah, that some guests, it's either you help them with some of your services, right? So they're not there yet, and you can sell
mhm,
them your services. It's like, I saw this on her podcast episode. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm gonna publish it because I'm not sure if it's useful to my audience, but here's the link. I post them on YouTube, so it's like unpublished link, so they can
mhm,
share it to their audience, but it won't appear on my chain. Um, and then like I can help you with that. I can help you go to the next level. Some other guests, they are carrying you on the pod with their audience, with their knowledge, with their wisdom. So yeah, if that's what you meant, like that was a nice kind of analogy. I still learn from every convo that I get.
mm.
It's either like, oh, I learned that I won't do that again with that person, with that kind of person, or it's like, oh, that's how they are, or that it reinforces or de-enforces some nodes in my brain. And it's a process. I think it's getting better and better, like the filtering process. It starts from my own interest in one topic, for sure, and then it's semi-automated. There's some filtering in there. I might check the LinkedIn profile. It might depend on my time schedule as well. Me, I've got it like fully automated and scalable, so much so that I did like 500 interviews in less than a year or something like that. So it's a bit extreme, right?
Good for you. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but that comes from my SDR business, right? Because I'm quite good at
Hmm.
outreach and these kinds of things, but still have the technical part. Other than finding the guest, right? Like, do you prepare? Do you go like right on the fly, like we're doing today? Because freestyling takes some experience and some guts. Like me, I've got on over 10,000 sales calls in my shortish career, so it's like second nature. I love talking to people. I'm a social
Yeah.
being. But what is the format? Do you prepare questions? Like, get in the details.
Yeah, I always prepare. So the first thing I do is I will definitely check people out. I'll go and see if they have a website. What is it saying? Kind of learn a little about them, maybe watch some of their social media. Like I like to feel like I know enough to be dangerous. But then I would say my former career, right? I did a lot of recruiting, probably 20 years worth. So, I
Wow.
can prepare, but then when I get into a conversation with somebody and they're saying something, probably like today, if something I said kind of sparked you and you're like, wait a minute, well, we're going to talk about this now, I'm going to switch gears. Happy to do that on the fly. So I would say it's kind of a combination. I always want to know enough about them to make sure we shine a light on what they do and make sure they appear great to the audience and things. But it's also like I'll switch gears if we need to.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
interesting, right? To think how the mind goes, like how it can branch out in some topics. Me, I have some
Hmm.
kind of ADHD mind, so I'll go where your serotonin is and where my serotonin is. We'll meet in the middle, and we'll create this like huge tsunami wave. That's how kind of I view it. But I also had these pods where, well, it's like 0.1% of the time, but I had like these legends on the pod, and they weren't like super cooperative, and then I got nervous, and then it cuts the whole flow, and then I'm like searching for my question, and I was like, oh, I should have prepared backup questions. Or so like they weren't cooperative, but I also had legends of folks that I really admire. For example, John Lee Dumas, not sure if you know
Mm-hmm.
his pod, but I had in not so long ago, Entrepreneur on Fire, the most popular entrepreneur podcast
Oh,
of all times. He's selling his business for 15 million, by the way. Very successful guy, makes probably 300K a month, uh,
wow.
and 90% profits. Um, and I got nervous
Incredible.
because I grew up on the guy, like I grew up listening to him, and to have him on my pod is like, okay, now you're there. And like the cortisol, it spike, like the heart is pumping, and he was a very chill dude. So
Hmm.
I guess to kind of avoid these situations, I'm interviewing Jordan Harbinger next week, which is also a podcast legend. So I guess I'll prepare a couple of questions to avoid that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think I always like to do that because you never know when there's going to be a lull. And just because somebody is successful doesn't mean that they are a good podcaster.
Right. Right. I also had these episodes which I expected something from them, and
Mm,
the final product wasn't that nice. Some of them, they're too PR oriented. They're like, okay, what are your views? Do this, do that, and they prepare so much, and like, dude, can't you just chill at this level? Like, can't you freestyle a little bit? Don't you understand that people, they need to trust? And if you regurgitate the same thing on the same podcast, and the podcast A, B, C, D, like, people are gonna think you're not authentic. I always had that questions, with podcasts and PR agencies, because most refuse me nowadays. Like, if I reach out to a famous guy, and then he sends me to his PR agency, like 80 to 90% are gonna tell me no. How do you deal with that?
interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think at the same time, so I love what you said actually about how if you're getting out there and you're saying the exact same thing every time, there's some value to that because there is a level of if it is about your business, then that probably makes sense. But to me, I think people listen to podcasts because they want to learn a little bit more about you. Like it's more about connection. And, I was on a couple of podcasts this morning before we got on this. I think I mentioned that earlier. And, somebody was asking me about something that happened to me at like 16 years old and how that affected, kind of what my trajectory has been in life and business and why I left that VP job is actually because of something that happened to me back then. And I decided to go a complete other way. And that kind of haunted me, a little bit and was like, I need to have more creativity in my life. And I was lacking that. And so I created that. So that to me is just as good, if not better, from a brand perspective. I didn't intend, to have that conversation when I walked into it, but I think it was really important and it was powerful because people are going to be like, whoa, like Sarah's a real person, right? I didn't know that about her. I somehow feel like I know her more. That tells me a lot about why she's doing what she's doing versus me just sitting here and being like, we make websites, they're really awesome, come buy from us, here's why we're really good. Like, that's all good and fine too. And hey, we are really good at what we do, but that's not the point, right? So I feel like there's kind of a mix here on sort of that personal connection level. And I think that's a lot more important when it comes to podcasts. So if somebody were to decline me because that were the case, I'd be like, okay, next. Thanks,
Right.
next.
The 16-year-old thing is quite interesting. So if it's out there, like if the information is public, yes, I will bring it up, especially if the guests have told me that they're comfortable speaking about it. Where was that piece of information? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of funny. This lady is a client of mine, and she's an author, and she's recording a book. So she started a podcast, and it's called Maybe I Can. Her name's Debbie Weiss. She's actually really cool. She's just getting started. She's gonna have fire. But she was asking me about a time when I thought that I couldn't, and told myself that I could. And, at a very young age, something pretty pivotal. Immediately when you say that to something, someone comes to something's mind. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to put it out there, right? It's part of my keynote speech now, too. I find when we're talking with our clients, and I don't know if you find this too, wherever they're at and they're struggling, or if they're trying to build something, both sides of the spectrum, a lot of that is coming from a place of something that they've really wanted to do, or some transformation that they've gone through, or something that they're trying to do to affect change in an area that they see has been problematic for themselves before. I always say the easy way of saying that is 99% of people are typically the ideal client or some variation of that. And that's why they got into what they did, or they needed to grow a skill there. And so I think it's really interesting when we work with people and we start to pull those stories out of them. And I'm like, that's the fire that's going to fuel your business, that's going to make people want to work with you, not just the thing that you're selling, because there's a million other people out there that can do the same thing. But they're not going to do it the same way you do. You just need to be more upfront about that. So I'm pretty passionate about that.
Love it. And I
Yeah.
just, various images fired up in my mind, like, yeah, like people that had breakthroughs in their lives. Then where can you find some of these people? The marketer in me asked. Then it said, oh, Tony Robbins events. So I would stand in the Tony Robbins event. He would talk about this business breakthrough. And then I would stand at the door and be like, hey, what Tony just talked about, because they have this emotional breakthrough. I would be standing at the door and I'd be like, yeah, I do that. And then I'd have
Yeah.
like 100K sales in 30 minutes. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much far-fetched, but no, that's right. Like people were convinced before you, they were educated on some topic. And yeah, thank you for that insight. Really interesting. We need to do another round. Sarah, like the mindset part, I think we need to go deeper in. It's one of my favorite topic. It's been very insightful. So thank you for that. Where can people find out more about you?
Absolutely. I'm hanging out on Instagram a lot at Sarah Jansel, or Sarah Jansel on LinkedIn. Or you can head over to my website, janselandco.com, and anything you submit there comes to me. So I will chat with you then.